Hey, Ask Nicely, what's been going on for the past couple months? Good to see ya.
Hi, Marion, and the rest of the world, whoever gets to see this. So much has been going on, and I have been really lame and lax in actually posting things because a lot of it's been really challenging and time consuming, and I haven't had a lot of brain space to post stuff. So right now you can see me planting flax. Flax is about 100-day crop. It's a cold season crop, so it needs to get into the soil early, usually around April 1st or so, and that means it's going to be fully grown and ready for harvesting around my birthday, July 14th. But besides preparing these beds, intermittently I've been working really hard on moving and dealing with all the stuff around the studio move and setting up the deep end, which is very exciting. But that has taken a lot of energy and a lot of time, more than I expected. Also, just the moving out of Panorama has been more challenging than I thought, mostly because of the cold weather and just being there for more than a couple hours and having it just being freezing.
Yeah.
But then in all of that, I've also been moving house, where I live. One of my things I did post about recently, I think, was the $100 million project, or why I periodically play the lottery. And, one of my big long-term concerns has been, housing. And the difference between shelter, housing, and home, these themes. And every single time I seem to make a little progress on my own behalf, things end up getting kind of screwed up and not great. And that always sets me back really hard. So been doing a lot of personal work on trying to how to land and take care of myself and plan for the future. And then on top of that, I'm realizing it's like, I still have long COVID, because every time I try to do more, my body and my brain say, nope, you gotta take it easy. And that sucks. And then another larger thing, which is harder to talk about, but some of y'all might recognize this, is that in my other jobs, because I have to work like multiple jobs to survive, and this has been true through almost every job I've had, it's not just doing the job itself, it's doing all that other work. Because, reality is a demanding level.
Oh, we see.
And so what I'm realizing, it's like I bring a certain kind of reality to the moment in my jobs. And so for a lot of times that means like I'm not going to just pass as what people think I am. I'm going to make sure that they're not going to be living in that delusional land. Like as a queer person, as a person with disabilities, as a person with all sorts of other things, of like whatever, I bring that and say, no, you can't say those things. That's fucked up.
Challenging isn't just an adverb, it's also labor.
Yes, and again and again and again, that has been a lot of the last few months of actually trying to press those edges and sharpen them and make them worthwhile. And one of the things is I have seen people in positional power step up and try to advocate, not just for me, but for everybody else who hasn't articulated this, but don't feel like they even have the power to do that. And that kind of work is really exhausting. I think lots of other marginalized people know this work, the emotional work, but it's also intellectual work. It's also like that shifting of the paradigm work of like reminding people and insisting on a reality, a lived reality. And that's what I've been doing also in my paid work. And then beyond that, of trying to create responses, creative, powerful responses in my creative puzzlement laboratory world that will allow me to investigate those things. I applied for 2 grants this year,
Yeah.
which seemed like they would be perfect fits, but I'm also realizing that that's perfect fits for me, but I'm not necessarily a perfect fit for them, because I don't fulfill all of their needs of making nice. Because a lot of times grant making is satisfying the needs of the grantor, not the person making the money. Grantees are doing the service for them so that they feel good about themselves.
Yeah, I've heard that somewhere before.
Yeah, I know. Other people say these things. I'm not making this shit up. And so it's like, my deep dig, my double dig, and my deep weave is sometimes not positioned very well for that. And this is one of the reasons why Patreon seems supposedly to be a good option, because people who know me and see me and can weave the different projects together into something more, it gives a space for that. But I'm not a really good propagandist in the traditional sense of the way. I'm not there producing broadsheets and things that rabble rouse and bring people to the moment to do it. I'm not a crisis management organizer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing this other kinds of deep digging and doing shit.
You're not really a headline generator.
I've made a magazine cover. Yes, I have. When I was doing the Pleasure Struggle, which was my other one of my other vehicles 20-some years ago, and I was traveling around with a giant 3-dimensional male genitalia puzzle, and I was taking it to different activities and things like that, and I was at the Urbana, what's it called, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign Sex Fest, and I had this giant male genitalia puzzle. I made the cover of the Illini newspaper. That was really exciting. And so I can do a little splash and excitement, but for the most part it's like, no, I just want to do the work. I want to bring people in so that they can figure out how to, what Marion and I were talking about earlier was like, what happens when you're in your nice little pot and you grow and you get root bound? What is the action so you can actually choose to go put yourself in a bigger pot, or do you break the pot, or do you send your seeds farther and live through your progeny, or do you just reach out and grab onto somebody else's plant and then pull yourself up onto them?
Sure.
There's a lot of different
There's also
metaphors.
a lot of ways that this touches the Labyrinth project as well, I think.
Yeah, and
because I think.
Thank you for reminding me.
Well, I think in thinking about ways of communicating and conceptualizing and expressing that are maybe a little bit antiseptic to specific kinds of attention that want to be satisfied.
Yeah.
The Labyrinth isn't just a medium, but it's also a challenge to our kind of cultural stylings.
So to pull people into the Labyrinth work, I'm realizing over the last many years as I reflect that I often take on these daily meditational practices in one shape or another. And my goal is to do it at least 40 days in a row, somewhere within the framework of this. And Labyrinth has been kind of bubbling up through my consciousness over the last year. And it's been hitting other people, connecting me to other people, and other people who are working with the idea of Labyrinth. And so I decided that I was going to do a lunar year of Labyrinth meditation. And then it was like, oh, do I just do this for myself? How do I open it up to other people? So the idea is that I will invite people on the full moons and new moons or thereabout, and for special other days, to join in this process and use it as a way of me learning how to articulate what the work of the Labyrinth is. Because a lot of people, there's a renaissance in Labyrinth work these days, it seems, and a lot of people go to workshops and go and walk a Labyrinth there. And I think a lot of people forget that walking a Labyrinth is actually this process of actually exploring the labyrinth within. You're exploring your maze, your interior working, so you can actually become more familiar with it and calm yourself, so you can not only get into things, you can get yourself out of them, and with a more understanding and a sense of accomplishment and an awareness. And instead of just doing this thing to calm yourself down within your little pot, it's actually a way of understanding
Within your
how
little
your
pot,
inner-
that's the root bound thing.
But we're getting there.
I know that. I'm just tying it back in because you mentioned it very briefly.
And as Marion is pointing out, there are a lot of different reference points that lead to other things. We call these pivot points in the School for Designing a Society. If you
Oh,
want
I
to
didn't know
investigate
that.
I know. There's lots of things.
There's lots of things I don't know.
There's lots of things that I'm just sort of like, oh yeah, there's that thing. There's this thing within the world. It's like, oh, let's stipulate to that. Like when I was part of R2K Legal, and you go to these court cases, to vent. It's like lawyers say, oh, we're going to stipulate that. It's just that you don't have to re-argue everything and prove yourself. We have already agreed on this. We don't have to talk about it again.
Yes.
And the thing is, but if my understanding of what I know is mine. And sometimes we have to actually go out there and name that. It's like, oh, we are stipulating these things. This is what we're talking about here in this way for that purpose. Yes. And like the gesture of growing flax so that I'll learn how to grow it and process it into fiber and fiber into thread. That's a really big metaphor about me walking towards my death, because that's all we're all doing. But as Marion and I were talking about root boundness and cycles, I was also bringing up how I slept last night for the first time in ages, and I slept well, so my brain is clear. And I was remembering seeing two quotes, one from Bertrand Russell talking about, he was asked about dictatorship, fascism, and he referred to Orwell's 1984 coming right on the tail end of World War II with that kind of things, and how 1984 was all about the terror of suppression, and Brave New World and Bertrand's thinking is more about the seduction of it, and how he believed that in the new dictatorships that we are a part of maybe now, that the system will seduce you into loving your enslavitude and your servitude and your obedience to the oppressive machine.
There's a pleasure in being root bound, depending on what's going on for you. It's a lot like giving yourself a hug.
Giving yourself a hug, but it's also people come and trim you and trim your leaves and make you into a beautiful bonsai. This is different than probably what inspired bonsais. This is my talking out of my ass.
Oh yeah, no, this has little to do, I get, with like the cultural traditions around bonsai. It's just an example of a plant with roots.
But it's also like in a regular forest out there are seeds that sprout. Say there's a tree that sprouts on the understory, and it grows just a little bit because the mature versions of them are towering over them, and they're actually it's only after years. It's okay. The bee's there. He's just hovering.
I know.
Not in your hair.
Well, he wants to be.
I know, but he's not now.
Yeah.
So but there's these little trees that just grow very, very, very slowly in the understory until one of the giant mature trees falls in a storm, and then it's the race, because the sunshine reaches down to the floor of the forest, for these little trees to start growing, and maybe one of them will become the big tree. The thing is, those years and years and years of tiny incremental growth, you have a tree that's like 10, 20, 30 years old that's only this big. And that's a bonsai.
Well,
in a natural setting, it's something that's been then created conditions to keep it small and keep it contained. Nature has done that. It's natural setting. How do you replicate that in its non-natural setting? It's like, oh, the human being have to come and clip and take care of it. So, but the thing is, at some point, my question is like, can you take a root-bound, carefully tended bonsai and rehabilitate it so it grows to its own specifications and own desires, our own possibilities? So much of our lives we keep children and ourselves in little root-bound little containers, little cupboards, and very infrequently do we get to grow big and strong and find out what our potentials are. Anyways, that's a tangent if you ever had one.
A little bit.
But that's a little bit of what I got. So like tomorrow is the eve of the full moon of April, the pink full moon. And somewhere we're going to do it, maybe on Belmont Plateau. I don't know.
That sounds fun.
It sounds lovely. We haven't done it there yet. And then, just so you know, May 1st is International Labyrinth Day, and that's going to be a special extra day where I'm going to actually draw out a labyrinth, and we're actually going to walk an actual labyrinth. And we'll see how that goes. But today we're planting flax. It's a process. Later on today, I'm going to be putting a lot of the seeds that I've been collecting and other people have been giving me and put them into trays so that they're going to start sprouting. So in another 3 weeks, we can transplant them into the garden. As Marion looks around with the camera, you can see there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And so now that it's warmer and it's more exciting and people are waking up in their own selves, we're going to be coming out of here and doing a lot more work and getting things done.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of other things that have been going on that are more personal, internal struggle, which I don't really want to talk about. But hopefully this is a long enough video and you made it through, and we're just going to call it a day.
You've offered up a lot of metaphor too.
Yes, metaphor.
This is you know how in elementary school
Yeah,
you would see these joke books
yeah,
that are just like, it's kind of a book for you to read, and it's kind of like a repository for things to repeat to your friends on the playground.
okay.
This has been kind of like a metaphor book, I think.
All right, I love that. Thank you, Marion, for videotaping this.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right, bye.